Hello, and welcome to The Season, the podcast from FYCit that goes behind the scenes of awards season. I'm your host, Ryland Aldrich, creator of the FYCit app. Today, I'm thrilled to share my conversation with Chris Albert. Over more than 20 years at National Geographic, Chris led awards campaigns for amazing documentaries, including the Oscar and Emmy-winning Free Solo. Now, Chris has launched his own venture and is out on the trail with this year's Oscar-nominated doc, Porcelain War. We discuss the ins and outs of what it takes to run a successful documentary campaign. Please stick around for that. One more week of pre-Oscars awards ahead. We've got CAS Cinema Audio Society, NAACP Image Awards, USC Scripters, and the Film Independent Spirit Awards all on Saturday, the 22nd. Sunday is the ASC Awards for cinematographers, the MPSC Awards for sound editors, the Guild of Music Supervisor Awards, and the SAG Awards, which will be streamed live on Netflix this year. Screenings have pretty much wrapped up for the season, but it was Anora that led the way over the last week with 4 added screenings. We may be about done for this season, but the FYCit app will be back for Emmy season with all the events info you've come to rely on, premium bonus content, and some new surprises in store. If you know an Emmys voter that isn't yet using FYCit, direct them over to fycit.app to download the app for free and stay on top of all the latest FYC screenings, events, and content. Now let's get to my conversation with Chris Albert. Today's guest is Chris Albert, recent founder and CEO of Albert Media Group after leaving his role as the Executive Vice President of Marketing and Communications at National Geographic. Over more than 2 decades at Nat Geo, Chris shaped the public narrative for the 135-year-old brand, steering award-winning documentary campaigns like Free Solo, Fire of Love, and The Territory. Now with his own agency, he's poised to bring that same creative edge to a broader range of projects, including this year's documentary contender, Porcelain War. We're excited to have him here today to talk about what makes a documentary awards campaign stand out, how to foster meaningful impact through marketing, and where he sees this ever-evolving industry heading next. So Chris, how's your season?
Nice to see you. Thank you so much for having me on. Very nice introduction. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
It's been a crazy award season because I made the decision after 2 decades that it was time for something new. And so I left Nat Geo at the end of the summer, and I was really going to take a lot of time off and maybe sit this season out. And then I was at Telluride and I saw Bob and Jeannie Burney of Picture House, and they had just signed on to release Porcelain War theatrically. And they're like, can we send you the film? We'd love to have you be part of it. And as soon as I watched the movie, I was like, I can't sit this award season out. This film is so special and really deserves a lot of love and attention. And then I got to know the film team, and they are just the nicest group of people you'll ever meet. I just spent the day yesterday in DC with Slava, one of our co-directors, and he is in the film doing interview after interview and sitting in his hotel room. And the amazing thing about Slava, 8 months ago, he spoke no English.
Wow.
And he speaks almost perfect English. This was long before I joined the film, but when they premiered at Sundance over a year ago, they had an interpreter for Slava and Anya. A few months later, they kind of, as they were on their journey, they ran out of money and couldn't afford the interpreter anymore. And they learned how to speak English, and it's really just incredible. And they're just such inspirational, kind, loving people. And then you think about what they went through and what they're going through and what their friends are going through in the Ukraine. It's just incredible, the poise and the grace that they have through this whole process. It reminds you that I love working on awards campaigns, and I love being creative and coming up with really interesting ideas. But it also has been such a great reminder that it's more than that, that the attention working on this film can bring to Ukraine and the people of Ukraine is so much bigger and so much more important. And it's been really refreshing that I can have a very small part in that whole process.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to see Porcelain War at Sundance last year, just taking a chance on a interesting looking still, really. It's such a captivating kind of imagery. And I highly recommend anyone who hasn't had a chance to see it yet to seek it out. Let's zoom out a little bit. You spent 20 years in Nat Geo, as you mentioned. You oversaw campaigns for some of the most successful documentaries. If you had to pinpoint one guiding principle you bring to all of your successful documentary awards campaigns, what would it be?
You know, I think a lot of people become obsessed with their perceived competition and become so distracted by what others are doing that they forget to focus on what they're doing. And by that, I don't mean ignore your competition or what the other films are doing. I love paying attention to what other campaigns are doing. I often draw inspiration from it or send them an email when I see something amazing that they've done and be like, wow, this was so smart. Congratulations. But it can also distract you from running your own race and focusing on your own campaign. Every film is different. Every creative director, producer is different. Every subject is different. And every campaign, I think, deserves its own bespoke effort. And so I really try to shut out the noise and focus on what I think is going to be best for the film I'm working on and not allow what others are doing to distract from the campaign that we're running. And it's hard. It's not easy to do that. Oftentimes you have your film teams looking at what other films are doing and being like, why aren't we doing that? How come we can't do this? And I find it just gets very distracting from focusing on you and your film and what's best for your film.
When you watch a documentary for the first time before really understanding fully the scope of the project, is there anything that you look at in particular when it comes to awards potential, maybe characteristics that show it could be a contender?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there's a number of things. I mean, first, when I watch a documentary, I just watch it to see, what is the director trying to say? What is the message? What is the impact this film could have? Because I think where we are in this country and in the world right now, the power of film and especially documentary to make an impact in the world is so important. So I look at that, whether that's an awards campaign tactic or not. I just think working on films that can have an impact in the world is hugely important to me personally. The awards sort of come second. And then I also look, what's unique about the film? What's going to make it stand out? What's the cinematography like? What's the music like? What's the editing style like? There's so many amazing crafts people that work on documentaries that I feel like don't always get day in the sun that they deserve. The thing I always liked about what people call double dipping, meaning can you do an Oscar campaign and an Emmy campaign? And our campaign for Free Solo, I think, is one of the reasons you're not allowed to do that anymore, because Free Solo won an Oscar and then won 7 out of 7 Emmys.
Sure.
The Oscar, of course, that was so exciting. But the reason I was so proud of the Emmys for that film is because it honored the cinematographer and the editor and the music. And it honored all the things that documentaries don't have the opportunity for in the Oscars. It's very rare, if ever, for a documentary. I'm not sure a documentary's ever been nominated for best cinematography or best score. They've had some breakthroughs in the song and in the international categories, which is amazing. But in the bigger mainstream categories, I don't think they've had breakthrough moments. So back to your original question, I look at the craft of the film, and I think a lot about Fire of Love, which is a movie I just absolutely love. And look, I worked at National Geographic. I worked there for 2 decades. I've seen a lot of films on volcanoes in those 2 decades.
None like that.
And I'd never seen a film like Fire of Love. I was just blown away by how the film was made and the approach it took and the craft and the storytelling, because documentaries are also stories and they can have amazing storytelling and do things in different and unique ways. And that's what gets me excited.
I'd like to break down the anatomy of a successful documentary awards campaign, kind of from the world premiere through to Oscar night. Maybe we can use a couple films that you've been involved with for examples and counterpoints. So Free Solo, which had a very condensed campaign and won the Oscar. And then let's also look at Porcelain War. That had a somewhat more traditional schedule and is nominated, of course, this year. Does that sound good?
Sure. That'd be great.
So most campaigns start with a world premiere at a major festival. Oftentimes this is Sundance or a festival at the start of the year. That was the case with Porcelain War. Free Solo, it was actually Telluride.
Yep.
Which is more of a traditional kickoff for a narrative film. How important is that festival selection to the ultimate success of an awards campaign?
I think for documentary, and you've seen it over the past 3 years with anywhere from 2 to 4 films nominated premiered at Sundance, because it takes a long time to get everybody to watch a documentary. You know, there's 800 plus people in the doc branch. There's over 150 films competing every year. And so that's a lot for the doc branch to take in. And so the benefit of premiering at something early like a Sundance or a Berlinale or a CPH Docs is it gives you a really long runway to get people to watch your film, to find your champions for your film, and to build a solid campaign, to find a distributor, to decide what your rollout is, all of those various pieces. So I think that's the advantage to an earlier festival in the year. Free Solo premiered at Telluride. You know, that was almost 10 years ago. And I think back to that premiere at Telluride, and it was such a moment. I didn't know the impact it would have of sold out audience until I watched it at Telluride with a sold out audience. And I was like, oh, wow, there's something really about this film. And so it just sort of took off after that. I mean, that was a lightning in a bottle film. It also did well at the box office, and people were incredibly excited. I kind of stopped my day job for like almost 2 months plus and just focused entirely on that campaign at the gracious approval of my bosses at the time, because we all, by that point, knew we had something really special. And so I was able to just give it 100% of my attention. Now, Porcelain War, I think, is also super interesting because, yes, it premiered at Sundance, but they didn't have a distributor. They didn't get picked up out of Sundance. They still don't have a distributor. Picture House has done an incredible job in the U.S. theatrical rollout, but that's it. There's no streamer, there's no broadcaster. And so I actually think they got an even later start, to be honest, than Free Solo. I joined the campaign and the film in October. And I would say back then, I don't even think we were on many top 10 lists of the year. What that team has been able to accomplish over the past, 12 plus weeks has been incredible to be a part of. But I think what has allowed it to get to this point is we got people to watch it, because it's one of those films that you hear the log line and you're like, do I really want to watch another movie about the war in Ukraine? And then you watch it and you're blown away. The music, I find it odd to describe a war film as beautiful, but it's a beautiful film. The artistry and the craft, to see the trajectory of how the film has taken off, the more people that have been able to see it, has been really incredible and fulfilling.
Counterfactuals are always difficult, but I wonder if you can imagine a world where Free Solo had premiered earlier in the year, as far back as Sundance or Berlin or something like that. Do you think that that would have been an easier campaign to run, or there would have been challenges about keeping that momentum up all the way until Oscars?
I think there might have been challenges. I feel like it could have peaked too soon. I feel like with that film, it was such a film of discovery, and people just discovered it very quickly and in really unique, interesting ways. So I actually think that rollout worked perfectly for that film. And I'm not sure it would have been the same if it had premiered at Sundance.
Yeah. Well, let's keep talking about the anatomy here. After that world premiere, oftentimes documentaries will go on to play, numerous other festivals. That wasn't necessarily the case with Free Solo, which I believe only played at Toronto before it was released a few weeks later. But Porcelain War played over 35 festivals: Big Sky, Hot Docs, Carlo Vivari, many, many more. Should filmmakers be thinking how that festival run works in terms of awards considerations early in the process? Oftentimes they're probably thinking more about distribution, but is there an awards playbook for the festival run, not playing too many or playing everything you can, that you would advise on?
Sure. And I think it can be different depending upon the film and if you have distribution. But for a documentary, especially one that's seeking distribution, playing festivals allows you more visibility, allows you to keep generating press and reviews, and allows you to reach members of the documentary community, because each of these festivals that you're mentioning have pockets of the documentary community that support those festivals, that always attend those festivals. And so it's a built-in way to get your film seen by the people that matter and can influence its trajectory and its future. And continue to bring value to the film as you are seeking distribution. So I'm a big believer in the festival circuit. Do you play every festival? No, you have to be strategic and smart because nothing is free. Even when they invite you, you still have to deliver a DCP or deliver a file and all those things, deliver posters and artwork and, nothing's free, but so you probably can't do everything, but finding the ones that you think are the right fit for your film, I think there's a lot of value there.
Yeah, next in the trajectory is typically a theatrical qualifying run or full release of the film. Free Solo dropped into theaters at the end of September, only a few weeks after its premiere, while Porcelain War's release was in November. What's the key strategy when it comes to a release of the movie?
I think something sometimes gets lost with documentaries is many documentary filmmakers have worked on these films for 5 years or longer. These are true labors of love, and many start out without financing or without distribution. So they're raising money as they're making their film. And so the end piece to be some type of a theatrical, I think is incredibly important, and they really deserve it. And I wish theater chains would even step up more and, do you have documentary Thursdays at AMC or something like that? Pick a night where they're not doing a lot of business and bring documentaries in. Find a way to market them better. Find a way to partner with the theater chains to bring people back for documentaries to the theater. And look, I think Free Solo was an incredible theatrical experience. That movie is amazing in surround sound and the score and the cinematography by that team, deserves to be seen in a big screen. But Porcelain War is also an incredible theatrical experience. The music in Porcelain War, which is by this Ukrainian band called Daka. Every time we've done a screening, I've seen the film many times now, so we'll usually run out and grab a bite to eat before the Q&A, but I always try to get back before the credits because I love the end credits of Porcelain War with intercut with this live performance of Daka with this footage that's never been seen, and it's just really well crafted and really, really great. And I always, when we did the screenings of Free Solo, I was always like, okay, we got to be back 20 minutes before the end because I need to watch Alex make it to the top again, even though I've probably seen that scene over 100 times in a movie theater, but it never gets old. It always is incredible.
During that release planning and execution, how typical is it for an awards consultant to be advising on that distribution plan with the idea of reaching voters specifically?
Well, I think there's a lot of communication and coordination that goes on because, one of the great opportunities with a theatrical distribution is having your filmmakers or your subjects there for Q&As. And Q&As is one of the ways that you will often get voters to turn out to see a film. I mean, if you ask Alex Honnold, he would tell you that was his full-time job for 6 months. He went to so many Q&As and was so gracious. And Sani, who I'm assuming most of your listeners know, but is now his wife, and they have 2 children together, which just makes me so happy that they have sort of had their happy ending as well. But they did so many Q&As and were incredibly gracious with their time. I remember this story and I don't think she'll mind, but Courtney Monroe, who's president of Nat Geo and was at the time, was on the carpet with Alex. And she told me the story after that she turned to Alex and said something along the lines of, I never imagined when we first talked about this that we'd be here at the Oscars. And Alex said something like, I never even knew what the Oscars were. So something like that. I'm paraphrasing a little, but it just makes me laugh because that was not, Alex did not climb El Cap for an Oscar or for anything other than it was just something that he wanted to do. So it just sort of reminds you in this campaign world that, there's bigger things too. And I kind of loved that moment.
So the film has been released or is in theaters. At this point, chances are you probably know if the film is in the conversation for awards. Now the campaign really kicks in. What does it take to move that film from just being in the conversation to being a real contender?
I think there's a couple key factors that help a film become a real key contender. First, I said this in a couple years ago and got quoted in Variety. So I guess I can say it again, which is no amount of marketing or campaigning can make a bad film good. So I think first you just need a film that's amazing and well produced, well directed, has all the elements there. I think after that, really it's finding your champions. I think that is probably the most valuable tool, is who are your champions in the documentary community, in the press, in the influencer world. All three of those sort of overlap in places, but finding your champions and asking them for advice and listening to them and having them moderate Q&As for you or record a Q&A for you. Because I think people pay attention to those in the documentary community who have a lot of influence. And if they are gravitating towards your film, that can mean something. And, that community is very tight. They all talk. I think there's text chains amongst them. So I think that, to me, that's the most valuable thing. And I don't think you need $1 million budget. I don't think you need full page ads in the New York Times. I think it's really finding your champions and using them to get the word out is the most valuable thing you can do.
So another term for those champions, and something that we've talked about before on this show, is the idea of the tastemaker, that sort of personal advocate for the film. What does a tastemaker mean in your world? How do you effectively engage those champions to really make sure that you're making the most of your chances?
Yeah, I think you have to be really smart about how you use your champions or tastemakers. I think those are probably interchangeable, but I think it's, can they moderate a Q&A for you? In the first two phases, you're allowed, I think, 4 hosted events. So would they be willing to be on an invitation to be a host? Would they moderate a Q&A? If they're filming or their schedule is too busy, would they record a Q&A on Zoom that you could use in a blast and put on your FYC site? I think those are probably the most valuable. And then it's just tapping into their network of people. And if they're going to host a screening, can they help get the invite out to their network of people? Because it's all about building your network of support for the film. And I think those are probably the best ways. And I also find it to be much more authentic when the tastemaker truly does love your film. Everyone will do favors for people. They all support each other. But when it's someone who comes to you and says, wow, that film blew me away, how can I help you? That's the golden touch. That's when you really should tap into, well, okay, how can we use them to bring more awareness to the film?
So in a narrative Best Picture campaign's typical path, you see a lot of work around the precursor awards, the Guild Awards, a film trying to sort of rack up wins. Would you say that that's analogous in documentary? You've got IDA's and Gotham's Porcelain War won the DGA award as well. How important are those precursors?
I think they're important because, again, it just helps you bring awareness to a film, especially one that doesn't have a distributor or doesn't necessarily have the big marketing budget that you sometimes can have if you have a distributor. So I think they all help in bringing awareness and attention. I also think you can succeed even if you aren't on those lists. So I think they're valuable, but I don't think if you don't make one of those lists, you should give up and think you're out. I think it's just thinking about, if that one didn't work out, how do you focus on the next? And the other thing I'll say separate from that, but I think is important to consider, is the documentary community is incredibly international. There are a lot of people around the globe who have a say and an influence, So I think stopping in cities, if you can afford it and your budget allows, like London and Berlin and Copenhagen, I think the international reach of the doc branch, and it makes sense. So many of the documentary stories are international in nature, but I think that's an important component to how you think about your campaign as well.
So, of course, the Best Documentary Award is one of the Oscars that has a shortlist. So it gets culled down to 15 films in December. Do you think it's harder for a film to make the shortlist, or more difficult to move on from the shortlist to the nomination?
I mean, I think if you look at just math, making the shortlist is harder because you're going from 150 plus to 15, and then you're going from 15 to 5. So you have a 1 in 3 chance of making it from the 15 to the 5. I also think, many documentary filmmakers are making films and are incredibly busy. And so some don't engage as much until it narrows down to 15. And then they'll really, and everyone gets assigned a batch to watch before they vote. And I think they all are really diligent about doing it, but someone's initial batch might only have one film that makes the top 15. When you get to the top 15, I think a lot more focus on making sure as many people can see it as possible, making sure you tout what's unique about the film, making sure you lean into the craft elements that you think make it a contender. And that's how you sort of get from the 15 to the 5. And it's almost heartbreaking too, because there were so many great docs this year. I thought almost all the ones in the top 15 could have made it to the final 5. There were so many really well done, interesting, important films that were on that list.
So let's talk about screening strategy a little bit, because a lot of the big studio movies, they really flood the zone with FYC screenings. Obviously something at FYCit that we watch really closely to see, hundreds of screenings for some of these movies. Now that's not possible or not common, at least with even the biggest documentaries. But how do you craft an FYC screening campaign for films, whether they're on the little bit smaller side or even up to the much larger size?
It's such a good question. I am so honored and fortunate. I'm a member of the Academy and I'm a member of BAFTA. I get so many screening invites every day, especially because voting started today for the Academy. And yesterday, I think I got 100 email blasts about the films that were on the portal and Q&As and things like that. So it can become a little overwhelming. And so I think there's nothing better than screening your movie in a theater for people to see it. I think it's just not flooding the zone, but being really strategic about when you're going to screen, how you're going to screen, in the phases where you're allowed hosts, having the right hosts, getting great moderators, because especially in documentary, the conversations after the film can be just as interesting and in-depth and poignant as the films themselves. And so having a moderator who can really engage with your subjects or your filmmakers on the filmmaking process and the impact that they're hoping the film can have, I think is hugely important as well. And I think even in the final phase, you're allowed to list your moderators on an invite as long as they're not an Academy member. So finding a journalist or someone who isn't in the Academy who will be really appealing to voters to moderate your screening can help as well.
Yeah, as you mentioned, we're recording this on Tuesday, February 11th. That's the day that Oscar voting begins. What are you typically thinking about for this post-nom phase? And how much are you really able to move the needle at this point?
I'm a big believer in keeping the pedal on the metal till the very last vote is cast. Voting starts on a Tuesday, but there's a 3-day weekend in the middle of voting. And so if other voters are like me, which I imagine they probably are, I will be spending a lot of my 3-day weekend finishing watching films, especially in some of the smaller categories that I haven't seen yet, because I want to watch them before I vote. So yes, voting opened today. I don't think a ton of people vote today. I think most of them vote on the back end of the voting deadline. We're still very active this week. We're still doing screenings around the world. We're doing them in Australia, New Zealand, in Mexico, in Paris, in London, in LA, in New York. So, we're still screening as much as we can to try to get those last voters out there to see it. And at this stage, people are very focused on watching all the movies. And yes, you can watch them all on your portal at home, but watching them on my TV is not the same as watching it in a theater. So I like to try to see as many in a theater as I can. So I think there are plenty of opportunities still, even with voting underway, to get your film seen before people cast their final vote.
Not every campaign goes exactly as planned. Do you care to share any stories from a campaign that maybe crashed and burned or didn't quite live up to its potential?
Oh, that's a tough question. I can't think of any film that I've worked on just as an awards contender. That's certainly a piece, but there are many other factors and reasons to work on a film. And this did not crash and burn, but The Territory is one of my favorite films. The film team's incredible. We made it on the short list and they didn't get a nom. And I'll never forget the call the day of nominations. It's one of the moments that I'll never forget because that film team they weren't upset. They were just so gracious and thanking everyone for working so hard because the film had such an impact and a huge impact campaign and is still making a difference today. And it ended up going on to win the Exceptional Merit documentary. So it got its day in the sun, which made me so happy for them. And I was there when they won, and it was just so special. So that's not a crash and burn at all. It just took a different path. It left the Oscar campaign and made it into the Emmy campaign and ended up winning. In that process, had an incredible impact on the world and really made a difference.
You recently launched Albert Media Group, as we've mentioned a few times. How much of your new focus will remain on documentary awards campaigns? What's your vision for AMG moving forward? Are you going to take next year off?
I doubt it. I do like to work. That's a great question. You know, after you work somewhere for 20 years, which I loved and am incredibly grateful for and was really fortunate with the opportunities I had, but being out on my own now for almost 6 months has really opened my eyes to just, there's so many other opportunities and exciting things to do. I've been incredibly fortunate to work on Porcelain War. It's been a dream experience. I also have done some work for the Kansas City Chiefs.
Oh, wow.
Super Bowl was quite painful. But congrats to the Eagles fans out there, I suppose. So anyway, what it has allowed is for me to open the aperture of the types of projects and companies I'm working for and working with, which has been really exciting and unexpected. And I've been really fortunate. But I do love documentary. I love the documentary community. I have a lot of friends in the documentary community. It'll always be a passion of mine and something that I will certainly keep working on.
Before we wrap up, I have to ask about the Nat Geo Lounge at Telluride. So that festival is not at all well known for having those sort of things, but that lounge has become my real favorite secret hideaway for the last few years. It's a wonderful place to connect with friends and filmmakers. What was your intention when you started that lounge? Was it to create the sort of if you know meeting spot? And second question, any idea if they're going to keep it going now that you've moved on?
Well, I think the idea of our Telluride Lounge that the team came up with was there was no place to just, gather. And so we did it to start with because there was one year when we had 4 films premiere at Telluride and we needed a spot after each of the premieres to gather, and hosting an event 4 nights in a row just was cost prohibitive. Having our lounge wasn't. And then we had a place to gather after each film premiere. And then it just sort of organically evolved into a hangout spot and a place where people would set coffees and meetings. We always had great swag. So that was always a reason for people to stop by too. But I loved it because it was really just about building community and a place for community to gather. I don't know if they'll continue it. I hope they do. I imagine they will because,
it can't be cheap.
I kind of hope they do because I'd love to hang out there as a guest if they'll have me. But I was sitting in that lounge when I talked to Bob and Jeannie Burney about working on Porcelain War. So it can lead to unexpected places. But it was a great idea. I can't take full credit for it. It was a team idea and it evolved each year into something really special. So if they don't do it and there's a client out there that wants to hire me to do it for them, let me know. Give me a call.
The FYCit Lounge, maybe.
Yeah, there you go.
I mean, I certainly hope that they keep it going. It's such a great little oasis. And obviously Telluride's all about seeing movies but it's nice to just have a place to duck in and have a Aperol spritz or 2 in between and not have to think about trying to find the place to sit down or whatever. So.
And I love Telluride. I love that festival.
Totally.
And there's one other festival I'm giving a shout out to, which is the Sun Valley Film Festival. I am on the board of the Sun Valley Film Festival effective this year, which is incredibly exciting. And it's a great festival. And they sort of experimented with moving to December. And the idea there is, is there a festival that could be the last stop before shortlist Oscar voting starts? And Porcelain War screened there. The Substance screened there. I think Wild Robot screened there this year. So they had a pretty good track record. So the festival will officially be in December this year. And it's also one of those really special festivals the thing I love about both Sun Valley and Telluride is that they're all about the movies. They're not about what advertiser has the biggest, activation or what party is happening.
Right.
And, there's those things too, but the movies have never strayed from being at the core of what they are. And that's why I enjoy them both so much.
So, Chris, we're just about done, but on the season, we like to finish off with a lightning round. So,
all right, hit me.
What is your favorite award show to attend?
I mean, look, nothing beats going to the Oscars. You have that moment, I'll never forget. The first time I went, I was actually there for Restrepo.
Oh, wow. Wonderful film.
And yeah, such a good film. And I'd never been before. It's like you're a kid and you love the entertainment industry and you watch it on television. Then all of a sudden you're standing there. So, it's magical. It's so meaningful because you work so hard to get to that moment. And then you're standing there with the film team who are beaming and excited, and you just take pride in the moment. So, that one is really fun. But look, I've been to the Golden Globes. You get to sit there and drink wine and their nice champagne during the whole ceremony. So that can be kind of fun too. I'm also going to give a shout out on this podcast that the Golden Globes really need to add a documentary category.
No doubt.
The Golden Globes is the International Press Association, and so many documentaries tackle important international issues. So I just can't understand why there is not a best documentary category for the Golden Globes.
So you jumped the gun on this one a little bit, but I'm going to ask anyway, what is your favorite film festival to attend?
Oh, well, I gave you those. Yes, Telluride and Sun Valley. I won't change my mind there.
Do you prefer Emmy season or Oscar season?
Wow, that's a really interesting question. The thing with Emmy season is there's now 5 different Emmy awards. Right. There's primetime, there's news and docs, there's cafe, there's sports, and I'm missing one. Oh, daytime. So there's 5 different Emmy awards. So that lasts all year, I feel like. So that's an all year round awards campaign. So, I think I like them both for different reasons.
What is your post award season ritual?
Oh my gosh, I was just thinking about that today as I booked my Oscar flight to LA, because I was like, oh, you know what? I'm going to stay an extra week and I'm going to go up to Los Olivos. I'm giving away my secret. I don't want to see a lot of awards people there. I like to have it to myself. But Los Olivos is in wine country near Santa Barbara, and it is just my favorite little town.
Amazing.
Maybe in the country. Before our podcast recording, I was looking at Airbnbs in Los Olivos to figure out if that's what I was going to do after the Oscars. So yeah, a couple days in wine country, relaxing, reading a book, and just whatever happens, I feel like we already won. We're going to the Oscars. So just celebrating the moment.
What is your favorite past appetizer at a screening reception?
I'm going to give away one of the worst kept secrets, which is I'm an incredibly picky eater. And I would have to say it's pigs in a blanket. Nothing makes me happier. And oftentimes when we were at Nat Geo, my team was like, we're not serving those, but we'll have them make a couple for you. I was like, okay, fine.
Do you have a least favorite awards speech cliche?
I don't love the laundry list of thank yous. I think you can send out a tweet, although don't be on Twitter anymore. So put it on Instagram. They're all bad, but put it on Instagram or something. I love it when they're heartfelt. I think this season, Demi Moore has just crushed every single speech because she has spoken from the heart. She's been authentic. I got to talk to her at Sun Valley, and I'd never met her before, but in December in Sun Valley, I talked to her, and she's just a lovely, thoughtful, kind person who never expected to be here at this moment in her career. And you really get a sense of that from her acceptance speeches so far. And so I love it when they're authentic and they're from the heart. The long list of thank yous, nobody cares. Nobody wants to hear that.
Do you prefer to watch FYC screenings at home or in the theater?
Definitely the theater.
Would you be more likely to cry or swear during an acceptance speech?
That's a great question. I might probably do both. And maybe even at the same time.
At an award show, do you prefer theater or table seating?
I like them both. The nice thing about table seating is that there's usually a bottle of wine or some cheese and crackers there. So that's always nice because they last a long time. But, theater seating's good too. I like both.
All right, final question. What is one award season prediction that you're willing to make?
For this year?
Yeah.
Oscars specifically?
Take it where you want.
That there's going to be at least one big surprise.
Chris Albert, thank you so much for joining us on the season.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun. Really appreciate it.
We're back, and I'm here with our FYCit Field Agent, Tony Miros. Tony, it wasn't the statue gathering week in LA you might have hoped for, but I hope you had a great time at the Artios nonetheless.
Honestly, I got to tell you, Ryland, even though I did not win both my categories, I had the best time. And when they say it's truly an honor to be nominated, it's not a lie. It really isn't. Like, they make you feel so special before, during, after. I mean, it's just a wonderful thing. If nobody's ever been nominated before, I got to tell you, you really feel like they're appreciative of what you do. And in my business, especially in casting, you never get a pat on the back. You never get a good job. Never, ever, ever does that ever happen. So to have a whole week, I had 3 days of it. I was like, oh my God, they actually like me.
Yeah. Any reflections on the fact that casting will be a category in the Oscars next year? I mean, that must have been in the air at the Artios this year, right?
It was. They brought it up. And, the fact of the matter is that I don't even understand why that was an issue. It's like, that, yes, those are certain actors that they want, but you have to fill out the whole cast. And a lot of that has to do with us and having to be creative. And sometimes you say, oh, well, does this have to be a man? Does this have to be somebody who's of, Hispanic origin? Maybe they're African American. Maybe they're Asian. Who knows? We're all working to make this project great. So I don't understand why that was an issue. I mean, I think they need to do the stunt people next, because honestly, how do you do those huge action movies? I mean, unless you're Tom Cruise by yourself, but honestly, other than that, those people deserve some recognition.
So you were in LA for the awards. You mentioned before you headed out that you had a whole bunch of activities planned. Maybe you can kind of walk us through what the pre-awards activities were like and the awards show, both from the nominees' perspective, but I don't know if you can kind of take a step back and think about it based on all of your previous awards attendee experience.
Yeah, it's interesting because, you go to the FYCs, you're interested in the film that they're showing you, and then you have like the reception. And when you're a nominee, it's just this big whirlwind. It's like a tornado, right? You get to town, everybody's congratulating you. I went to the pre-Artios member mixer at the Astor Hotel on Vine in Hollywood. And I've been there before several times for other FYCs, and they do a great job. But this was just for casting directors, and it was given by Talent Systems and Spotlight. And it was a great opportunity to talk to other guests and other nominees and other casting directors, because the board of directors were there for CSA. And people that I'd seen in the past, but had not seen recently. And then I made new friends too. It was so interesting. I tell you, I got to meet all these great people that I'd never even thought about that I'd ever meet. And it was lots of fun because at the Astor, we had this whole lounge to ourselves. There was an open bar, past hors d'oeuvres. I mean, same old thing I'm used to the FYC events, like mac and cheese balls and chicken sliders. And, but it was, you were talking to all your peers, and it was quite interesting. I mean, I find myself in these situations where I'm talking to this casting director. I have no idea who they are. And then I go to the Artios. I'm like, oh, wow, they did that movie? Like, it's pretty awesome. And then the next day I had a luncheon in Beverly Hills, and that was hosted by CSA, and it was for regional members. So people who were not living in LA at the time. And because I'm going back and forth, I'm considered regional. Again, it was like family styled lunch. So we were all having different things. They had vegan pizza and salmon and mac and cheese and cauliflower and all these great things. But I'm sitting across from the table from this woman, and she's very lively. She was so funny. I was laughing my head off. And at the Artios Awards, she wins for Wicked. I'm like, wow. Oh my God. I'm talking to the woman who cast Wicked. Like, this is what I'm talking about. And even when I got to the Artios, you feel like you're in a Hollywood movie because it took place at the Beverly Hilton Hotel, and that's where the Golden Globes happen. And you walk in, and everybody's walking everywhere. You see hundreds and hundreds of people, and then you have to check in. And you check in, and they have a sheet. It's a sheet with your name, with what you're nominated for. And that's what you take to the red carpet that you give to the publicist who's assigned to you. And they walk you down the red carpet. And it's funny because I've done red carpets, but not as a nominee. And they treat you so different. They really do. Like when you're on the red carpet just as a person, they're like, move on. But as a nominee, they stop you. They ask you questions. It was really fun. And then we have the cocktail reception and everybody's chatting away and a dinner. I don't know if you know, but we have a huge full dinner. I was sitting at the Netflix table with the other nominees. It was great because again, they're all Netflix people, but I had two categories and the other table, which was for Disney, was on the opposite side of the room. And I was going to go over there when they did the announcing of our category, but it was out of order and they didn't give us a sheet. I didn't know when it was coming. So before I know it, they're announcing the other one. And I'm like, well, I didn't get to that table in time. But we didn't win that one. It went to Queer Eye, who they were at my table at Netflix. So here I am waiting to hear my name. And instead it's the girl sitting across from me. I'm like, okay, now I know what it feels like when the camera's on the winner and you're sitting next to them. And you're like, just smile. Don't look like you're upset. Just smile. But it was great because the MC was Janelle James from Abbott Elementary. She's hilarious. And she was like, oh, I didn't even know casting directors had an award. They're like, I could do anything. I could be anybody you want. Remember me for your next project. She was so funny. It was a great night. We had lots of fun. It was like the whirlwind and, you're having fun and then you get up to go to the bathroom and you can't even get to the bathroom because you bump into everybody you know and everybody's congratulating. I'm telling you, if you've never been nominated, just hope that you do because you just feel like $1 million. And even though you didn't win, you leave and everybody's still nice and wonderful and you had a great time. And I had a great time. I really did.
Very important question for you, Tony. Did anyone ask for a selfie with you?
Oh, actually, I have a friend of mine who I hadn't seen. He was up for casting animation and he took a selfie of us. So he was the only person who asked me. But I took a selfie with Janelle. Yes, I did. I got her in the lobby and I'm like, Janelle, you did an awesome job. I need a selfie. And she said, sure. So, of course, selfies were taken.
Has this experience at all changed your view of the FYC events and the campaigning and everything that goes on after years and years of going to FYC events? Of course, our FYC event junkie, as we've dubbed you. Has that changed at all for you think?
I really respect the fact that we are in a creative form and whatever that is, whatever you're either an actor or cinematographer or director or producer or writer, you're really celebrating those people and what they did that year. And so as a nominee, again, you feel like $1 million. You never get thanked ever. And just to have that moment, just a moment when they call your name out and you're with these other fabulous people that you never thought that this would ever happen to you. It is like lightning in a bottle and it goes right through you. And you're like, wow, all the stuff I've been through, the 20 years of going through shit. Sorry for that. But honestly, the 20 years, just you go and you go, wow, this is what it came to. And I'm so happy. And, going to FYCs and seeing these people and listening to them, it's just respect, right? I mean, I hate it when people get up before the Q&A. It's like, you're here and you should listen to what they have to say because you're going to actually have to vote for them. And take it seriously. And I like to take that seriously. Me and my best friend, we go to all these things because we're taking it seriously because I want to hear what they did and I want to see what they did on screen. And when it's time to vote, I may like things because I like them because of my taste, but you can't deny that somebody did a great job or wrote a great script or performed their butt off. And you have to just say, yeah, it wasn't my favorite, but they deserve it. And honestly, that's what I come away with after FYCs this year.
That's great. Really appreciate that insight, Tony. Well, the Oscars are coming up. It's almost over. Have you seen everything on your list?
There's some little things that I have to still see, but I got to see the substance. I have been after this movie all this time. Listen, here we go. I loved Demi. I thought she did a fantastic job. Really, truly. But wow. Wow. It was like blood and gross. And I was like, okay. Well, I'm glad I didn't have lunch before I watched that movie. But all the best of luck to her. And did you see it?
I did. Yeah, of course. I think I've seen pretty much everything at this point.
There's only one, I noticed on FYC app, there's only one screening this week here in New York, Soho House for Anora, and I don't think there's any more, right?
Yeah, that's it. By the time this airs, they will have pretty much officially wrapped up. We're recording this on Monday. The Oscar voting closes tomorrow, and pretty much when Oscar voting closes, the studios wrap up the screenings. But don't worry, because the Emmy events are already rolling out, and the app will be back with more for Emmy season. But before that, we will be back next week. We're going to wrap up Oscar season with a fun event. So I know you know a little bit about that. We'll keep that under wraps, and we'll be back on the podcast feed next week to wrap it all up.
Well, I want to just thank CSA, all the nominees, all the winners. Congratulations on your achievement. Everybody this year, you deserve it. Whatever it is that you did and that you got nominated for, you deserved it. And just live it and enjoy it and have a great time. And thank goodness that we are allowed to still do these things. And I'm so happy to be a part of this industry.
Thank you so much to our FYCit Field Agent, Tony Miros, and to Chris Albert for all the insight. We'll be back next week to wrap up the season with a few special treats in store. We'd love to hear what you think of the season. You can leave us a review on your podcast app or drop us a line at podcast@fycit.app. If you enjoyed today's episode, please tell a friend. And don't forget to follow us on social media at FYCit app. You can also visit fycit.app to sign up for our newsletter, download the FYCit app, and stay up to date on everything happening this award season and next. Join us next week for another episode of The Season as we dive deeper into the stories behind the awards. Until then, remember, at FYCit, award season starts here.